It's 2024, and there's one question on everyone's mind. Who built that wall thing? Was it Bran the Builder? Was it giants? Who was it? Well, that's what we're going to take a look at today. So greetings everyone, and welcome to this little video on the wall, where we're going to examine 3 of our real-world theories and compare those to what people in the books think about the wall, and maybe have some fun along the way. But first, I want to give an extra big shout out to our wonderful patrons, Hawk, Detura LaCroix, and the Interesting Nerd Club. Thank you so much, guys. It's always wonderful to have the contributions to cat food. And of course, we also have Miranda and Chables. And if you want to join them, you can get fun stuff like seeing the videos early, or access to whatever rare exclusive content I put out. And when I have the time, I try to upload photo dumps of the cats. And with that, let us turn our attention to the wall. We're introduced to the wall in the prologue chapter, though we never actually see it. And though it's mentioned a lot in early chapters, no one actually sets eyes on the wall until Bran 3, where he sees it in one of his green dreams. Finally, he looked north. He saw the wall, shining like blue crystal, and his bastard brother Jon, sleeping alone in a cold bed, his skin growing pale and hard as the memory of all warmth fled from him. And after this, our first physically present description of the wall comes from Jon, though rather late in the chapter that it's introduced in. The sun had almost broken through the clouds. He turned his back on it and lifted his eyes to the wall, blazing blue and crystalline in the sunlight. Even after all these weeks, the sight of it still gave him shivers. Centuries of wind-blown dirt had pocketed and scoured it, covering it like a film, and it often seemed a pale gray, the color of an overcast sky. But when the sun caught it fair on a bright day, it shone alive with light, a colossal blue-white cliff that filled up half the sky. The largest structure that had ever been built by the hands of men, Benjen Stark had told Jon on the King's Road when they first caught sight of the wall in the distance. And beyond a doubt the most useless, Tyrion Lannister had added with a grin, but even the imp grew silent as they rode closer. So the wall is pretty intense and pretty darn impressive as a feat of architecture. And in the text, building of the wall is largely attributed to Bran the Builder, giants, children of the forest, and magic of some kind. And among maesters there is some dispute about whether the wall is constructed entirely of ice, but though in-world legends and arguments differ, they kind of fall within this general threshold. For example, Maester Aemon brings this up when speaking to Stannis.
The Night's Watch has been choosing its own leader since Brandon the Builder raised the wall. Through Geomormont, we have had 997 Lords Commander in unbroken succession.
So now that we kind of have a rough idea of what people in-world think about the wall, likely built by this dude named Bran the Builder, maybe had some giants, maybe had some children, maybe had some magic, let's see what our real-world theorists can do with this, and if they can provide us with a little bit better of an explanation, or perhaps refine how these elements all work together to give us the wall. And the first video we're going to take a look at here is by YouTuber Mira Reads. So let's jump in and check out who built the wall. Updated, solved, maybe.
In the last video, I hypothesized that the crypts of Winterfell may have originated as burial mounds, which explains why the earth wasn't leveled before the castle was built. Similarly, I believe that the foundation of the wall is actually a series of burial mounds connected to the roots of the weirwood trees. The architecture of both Winterfell and the wall are attributed to Bran the Builder. Both are thought to possess a level of inherent magic, and we know that the greatest feats of magic in the books are accomplished through great sacrifice and death.
So as we can see, much like Mira believes the wall to be built on existing burial grounds, her theory is built on top of her existing theory, and you'll have to go check out her channel to get more. But I think it's interesting to note that she points to a connection with the weirwoods, as a connection to the weirwoods is something that will pop up in future theories. I think it's also important to note that Mira adheres to the belief that something supernatural was involved. This wasn't just men or even giants carving blocks of ice and constructing it piece by piece over time. As many in-world and out-of-world do, Mira points to some magic, potentially connected to death. And this would make a lot of sense within the theory, because if the wall is constructed on burial mounds and there is an attachment to the weirwoods, both of these things have a lot to do with death. And of course, there is speculation that the Stark crypts themselves were made of stone to keep the Old Kings of Winter separated from the weirwood network. So this theory works with a lot of what we see across the book's in-world, and with many of the premises and understanding we see with the characters, while adding some elements that might help better explain the gaps there in the story, and might help better explain how the wall really could have been constructed to this scale. Now, as far as the specifics of the construction, Mira goes into detail about that as well. So let's take a quick look at that right now.
We've seen a common theme of caverns, bones, and underground water sources. And what is ice but solid water? Dear viewer, I believe that the wall was constructed as part of the pact between the children and the first men described in a previous video. Using a combination of water and death magic, the children hauled an underground river up through the burial mounds of the giants, creating a wall of ice, stone, and death.
Particular note should be paid here to the death magic aspect of what Mira is putting forward, as this is not the only time we're going to encounter death magic in our theorizing. Like any good wall theory, Mira Reads also has a hypothesis as to what's up with the Horn of Joramun, and what exactly is going on with that whole waking giants from the earth thing. So let's take one more look at Mira's theory, and dive into how she thinks the Horn of Joramun is going to fit into all of this.
The final piece of evidence that I believe ties everything together is the Horn of Joramun. Multiple characters believe that the horn can be used to bring down the wall, but whenever the horn is mentioned, another line is repeated. Quote, "And Joramun blew the horn of winter and woke giants from the earth." Giants. It is likely that, if the horn does in fact exist, it is designed to do just that. Wake giants. And to anyone who knew or believed that the wall was built on a series of giant graves, it would be obvious that blowing such a horn would break the wall from its foundations.
So we've got quite a few elements combined there. But particularly I want us to lean on those supernatural elements, the death magic, the idea of water being pumped up from underground, and that the Horn of Joramun does actually have some real potent magical power. Power which likely can affect the structure of the wall. So let's keep all these things in mind as we go forward, and again I encourage you to go look at all of Mira Reads' theory in entirety so you can get a better and more complete picture about what she's talking about. Now our next theory is going to touch on a bunch of those elements, so let's move forward and examine another interpretation of how the wall was built by Company of the Cat.
Because I really do not know how to explain my idea gradually, I'm gonna say what I think happened and explain why I think that afterward. From what we see in the series, the others cannot pass the sea. So they made the Horn of Winter similar to the Hammer of the Waters, but instead of raising the sea and drowning the land, they raised a wall of seawater and froze it into place with magic. According to legend, the wall was built by Brandon the Builder with the assistance of the Children of the Forest and the Giants, and it is reinforced with ancient spells and sorcery. If the singers were involved, then obviously the magic must have been similar to some extent to what we know the children could do.
And so we see the idea again that supernatural, potentially death-based magics are at play, and it's not merely a man-made construction, chiseling blocks of ice and stacking them up. Company of the Cat's theory also provides a very explicit source for all of the material used to create the wall. It literally came from the ocean. And very notably, Company of the Cat's theory is also connected to weirwoods, in a way that we will see again coming up in our very next theory. As she believes the weirwoods are not only conduits for magic and power, but also for water. And she cites the fact that the weirwoods are allegedly connected to the Sunless Sea. So let's hear how Company of the Cat analyzes the weirwoods' role in helping create the wall, because she's going to work that into the whole concept of water being pumped up from the ground.
The weirwoods and the wells also play a huge role. In reality, the trees and the wells do a very similar job. They work as a gateway. They are the links between the underground and the surface. They also transport water from the underground to the surface, and according to the information we get from Leaf and Brynden, they can also transport power. People can get power from them, and we know it to be true. We have seen it. The paste Bran ate, along with whatever else, had weirwood sap in it, and linked him to the trees. People can be tied to these trees that help them gain power, help them fly, and these trees have their roots in this sunless sea. I think that blowing the horn causes the trees and the wells to conduct water from the abyss Leaf was talking about and freeze it into place. After all, a weirwood controls who passes and who doesn't, and this weirwood is inside a well. They are literally the gate, the passageway from one realm to another. Not only everyone's magic is involved if this is the case, but the wall is directly connected to whatever magical core is there underground, and explains why the hell people feel so uncomfortable there, and why the magic is stronger than in Asai.
Now this is far from the end of Company of the Cat's theorizing. In the earlier part of her video, she touches on the properties, both thematically and real-world and in story, of salt. So let's take a brief examination of what Company of the Cat had to say about salt.
Salt, like fire and ice, can be both destructive or helpful. It has the same duality and the same symbolisms, and we see it in many instances in the story being important and symbolizing pretty much the same things as in real life. Looking at all this, I am becoming more and more convinced, to be honest, that salt is involved in the construction of the wall. First of all, the wall stretches from westwards by the bridge to eastwards by the sea. Both locations stop at water. In the east, it stops at the sea, and the westernmost castle, according to the official maps of the Lands of Ice and Fire, is south of the gorge, and just east of the Bridge of Skulls, pretty much at the place where the river meets the sea. And this is the strongest evidence for me that salt prevents them from passing. Ice is pretty much frozen water, and when the others arrive, the cold is unbearable, the cold is different, alive, they can smell it. It is almost magical, and for some reason, they can't just freeze the top of the sea and pass. Yes, salt water has a lower freezing point, but it's not that significant of a difference, and it shouldn't be that hard for the others, whose cold weapons can shatter steel, to freeze it. Something is preventing them from doing this, and I would say that this something is the salt.
So there we have it. Company of the Cat adds a whole nother big layer of analysis with this whole salt deal. And I think she makes a pretty good point, not only about salt's place in the story, but about why it's a little strange that the others can't just freeze seawater and walk around the wall. And it helps answer questions as to how the wall repels them. More than just being magical, there's a physical elemental element to it. And as with Mira's theory, we're going to touch on the Horn of Joramun here, because Company of the Cat has a pretty similar take on the Horn of Joramun, but it's also a little bit different. So let's have a peek at that before we move on to our third and final theory.
What is weird about the whole situation is why make a horn that brings down the barrier that protects you in the first place? Why the hell make a horn that brings the wall down? There is the army of the dead beyond the wall, and generally nobody seems to know when the others will come knocking. Why bring it down? Except if it isn't just for bringing down the wall, but also for raising it up. The horn's name is the Horn of Winter, so it is used in winter and most likely has ice magic powers. But if it is to be used in winter as the name suggests, why bring the wall down? It doesn't make sense. They say they are the shield that protects the realm of men, they're guarding the wall, and at the same time they are the horn that wakes the sleepers. So it makes sense to bring the wall up. The wall looks like a giant raising from the earth. The horn wakes something strong in some stories, and it can also control something at the wall as well in others. So I think the horn was made to raise the wall. It controls the wall, and depending on the intention of the blower, it can bring it up or down.
As you can see, Company of the Cat brings a lot of great analysis in, and I've barely even scratched the surface of what's going on in the video. It's almost an hour long, so I highly recommend you go check it out. But what I want you to focus on is, in spite of some differences, there's quite a lot of similarity in these two theories, actually. So we've got one more theory to look at really quick, and within this theory, I think we're going to see, again, a ton of the same elements we've seen in these two other theories we just looked at. And so for our final theory, we're going to take a look at a video by Michael Talks About Stuff, again here on YouTube.
The well shaft is a weirwood trunk, guys. Think about it. Think about everything George has lined up here. It is a giant white shaft with a weirwood face partway down. Weirwood faces are carved into the trunks of trees. There is a giant weirwood face here because this is a giant trunk of a tree. Trees pump water from their roots up the trunk and out their branches to hydrate their leaves. If you have weirwood trees planted the size of redwoods within the wall, connected to the underground rivers and streams and water sources that we are constantly reminded of throughout this story, they will act as a water pump, endlessly doing what trees do, which is pumping water from underground and up through themselves And if they run like veins throughout the wall, you have created a circulatory system that feeds water into the interior of the wall, where glaciation can take over and rebuild the wall from the inside out.
Now, I've mentioned Michael's theory in a previous video, so you may already be familiar with it, but what I want you to notice here is that we have basically the same idea as in Company of the Cat's theory, and a modified version of Mira's theory that uses a lot of the same elements. We have some force, in this case the weirwoods, pumping the water up from the ground. Now again, I want you to note that each theory has its own difference and its own flair, and Michael's theories get much more expansive, so you will need to check out other videos to explore his idea fully. But functionally, they all reject the idea that the wall was actually constructed using some kind of physical or non-magical means. And they all push in the direction of the wall being one solid large structure, rather than blocks of ice stacked on top of each other covered with snow and dirt or whatever. Now, I'd like to take some time to dig a little deeper into Michael's theory really quick here, because there are a lot of elements in it I find quite unique. Again, each theory has their own distinct flair and their own distinct interpretations.
We have a mechanism by which water can be pumped up into the wall, and a mechanism by which water can be frozen, and those things are connected. They could easily be, both of which together, the thing that powers the wall. If there are others bound to the weirwoods crucifixion style, and these weirwoods run throughout the entirety of the wall, if the others are perhaps children of the forest who were turned into others, if they had to take their own kind and turn them into others, and that's how they turned the trees into warriors, perhaps there are literally crucified children as mile markers within the wall. But even if they aren't children, on the other side, there is the fact that Daenerys learned that when you crucify bad people, she comes in, she takes the slave masters who were doing bad things and crucifies them. That's still not good either, because it leads to retribution down the line. People come back and try to destabilize Daenerys because she crucified their family. If the others are coming back and trying to bring down the wall and attack humanity because we crucified their family, or part of their hive mind is still crucified within this wall, that's a very interesting conflict.
So as you can see, Michael does quite a lot of speculating around the circumstances that even led to the wall being created, and a lot of elements here are quite different than we've seen from previous theories. But I think the idea that there is actually some sort of sacrifice, be it willing people who gave up their lives to be part of the wall, or unwilling people, is an interesting concept. And when I say people, I mean they could be others, children of the forest, humans, even giants, maybe a combination of all them together. But this does touch on our previous concepts of death magic, so even though it is a different interpretation, there still is a lot of similarity here. And I again want to draw your attention to that similarity before we move on to check out one last portion of Michael's theory here.
But we're not quite done yet, because there is more speculation, and I know this is a wild claim to suggest the wall was grown in a line of weirwoods by Bran the Builder with the help of the children, perhaps the giants as well, as the stories say. They grew a line of weirwoods, and then they did the magic that creates the others, but left them bound there, thus creating a forever magical ward. It's possible they did it that way, it's possible they somehow captured others in the actual war against them, and took literal prisoners of war and crucified them to these trees. That's also compelling, but I think if we have direct visual of a spirit being pulled from the wood into a human body while that human is strapped to a weirwood, even if it was in the late seasons of the television show, I'm going to use that as a hint to lean in the direction of that's how they did it. They strapped people or children of the forest to these weirwoods crucifixion style and pulled the other's spirits from the weirwood itself into this physical body. But do we have any sort of foreshadowing of prisoners of war, or anyone really, being trapped in the wall forever? Well, yes, we do. We have the 79 Sentinels, who are very specifically, much like the others, coded with tree symbolism and tree metaphor, because Sentinels in A Song of Ice and Fire are one of the most common types of trees that George refers to.
So as you can see, like Mira Reads in Company of the Cat, Michael seeks to tie in elements from across the book series, though he reaches in slightly different directions. And there we have it. 3 different theories about the wall that share some fascinating similarities. And I hope you've enjoyed this little short peek into these ideas and my highlighting of how they share some fun stuff. So now below in the comments, let me know, which of these theories did you prefer? What aspects did you like? What are your own theories about the wall? Tell me a bit about what you think. Did any of this change your mind? And of course, feel free to drop me any questions about the wall. I don't know how well I can answer them, but I'll try. And let me know if you've encountered any other theories out there that you think are fun that I should take a look at. If I could round up 3 other pretty distinct and unique wall theories, I might do another video like this. Again, I really hope you guys enjoyed today's video. And as always, thank you guys for watching, and I will see you next time.